Okay.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the fifth Imposter Syndrome Awareness Day. We've had some amazing conversations and guests today so far. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined this afternoon by Stephen J. Manning. He's a business leader, columnist, author, and speaker. And he's an all-round great guy. And I've had a couple of conversations, video calls with him recently, and really, really enjoyed them, Stephen. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure, I promise.
Okay. So to kick off this discussion, which is more of a fireside chat rather than an interview style, but I wanted to kick it off if you could perhaps talk a little bit about what imposter syndrome means to you and how you personally see imposter syndrome and define it.
Uh, Thank you. First, I have heard of imposter syndrome, and then I was enlightened talking to you and reading you. I'm fascinated to find that 70% of the people in our world, certainly those that are thinking individuals, experience imposter syndrome. I expect to some degree or more or less. Of course, I contemplated where I fit on that spectrum. And as with everything else, there are extremes, and then there's the rest of us. So I thought about it in context of something is more palatable than a syndrome. So insecurities. Okay, well, we all have insecurities. And there are perhaps some folks that don't, namely those that are clinically insane, and then the true hardcore narcissists. But then you also enlighten me to the clear confluence of imposter syndrome and narcissism. I
Hmm.
haven't didn't quite put that in perspective. So, in terms of imposter syndrome, again, starting out with insecurities, uh, I contemplated a wonder, and you will educate me in time. How does how do insecurities ultimately metastasize into an imposter syndrome, or perhaps even a clinical pathology of that? I don't know how to define that. Perhaps it's some form of insanity. I don't know. And then, so I wonder how that process goes because it clearly does go. There are those of us who've been around a while in businesses, lots of different businesses, either directly as owners, operators, employees, or as you have an incredible bevy of clients that you advise on a lot of things, and you see this, and you see manifestations of it. Now, I am certainly more heightened as to this imposter syndrome, having talked to you and learning from you than I was before. I looked at that in my past, certainly many business encounters as, whoa, what a degree of, is this person for real? Am I
Yeah.
watching a quality poseur at work? And then you see the insecurity that creeps into it, and you see the fear is something else to contemplate it. The fear of being an impostor, which is real and it's very evident. So again, looking at it from my personal perspective, which is what you asked me to do.
Mhm.
So I said, what do I do to combat that part of me, which may in fact be an imposter or perceived as one? The difference is not a distinction without a difference. It's quite real. The perception is real. When you're face to face with you, it takes a dumb person to try to fool Lisa. It just doesn't work that way. And it takes a really silly, limited individual to try to fool any one of your clients. Those folks may have issues, but one thing they're not is dumb, and they're limited in very specific ways. That's why, thankfully, they hire brains like yours, and hopefully us. So I asked myself, what have I done? What have I learned where I combat the urge to become an imposter? How do I deal with that? First of all, I'll try to be brief. I will assert that if I have strength in business, in my personal relationships is very, very, very important. So I have yet to find a way to really bifurcate the personal from the business.
Mm.
I think that if I have one driving strength, is that I become as a businessman, as a writer, a broadcaster, whatever. I become very clear on what I know, and more importantly, what I don't know, and to combat being something I am not or being perceived something I am not. I absolutely express that very, very frequently, clearly. This is not my competency. I will not speak to it, or I'll speak to it strictly as a matter of opinion, rather than, hey, I'm going to state this with great authority. You know, when you're a big person and you talk loud, wave your arms, you can speak with a lot of authority, and you'll knock some people over. Not those people that you want to. Now, the other point, and I'll relinquish the mic in just a moment. One of the greatest lessons I learned as a young man, and I was young by any measure. I was driving very hard, running by then a very successful mid-sized business. Uh, I think we might have been doing 400, $500 million at a time. Ultimately, the business grew to multiples of that. But um, I was too young, admittedly. I became much smarter, if you will, in the years to come when I developed a social conscience. And I realized that it's not sufficient to cause things to happen in the business that's ticking up there just because you think you're right. I think that's being an imposter. Frankly, I didn't quite label it that, but you're an imposter. You fancy yourself a leader, a great leader of men and things, and you're a kid learning. And that's when I reached out to learn from very, very smart people. And at the same time, I was already the biggest buyer and seller of media in our channel in the US. That does something to the mind of a young person, cautionary flag. And then I learned something in the knees of a very, very wise man. I'll share with him. He's John Barrowcliff. John was an Uber operations guy worldwide. And one day at his knee, I did something befitting a young guy with great drive. And he pointed out to me that I needed to be very clear about who and what I am rather than what I represent. So when I go out there, you need to present yourself, comport yourself accordingly. It ain't you. It's what you represent. So make sure that is what people walk away with. It's interesting to me that, how few leaders and managers are vigilant to this. If you are an enlightened leader or manager, you best detect those symptoms in people that report to them, colleagues, even bosses. Because talk about stepping on a landmine. How about you do something, say something that a person like you will say, oh, opposer, an imposter. Okay. Earning brownie points, talking out of your head. Now, I have had the opportunity to mentor a few people, younger, much younger, and then older than me. And I said, you know what? It's an amazing thing that and again, I didn't label it, I should have, when the imposter in you surfaces at the wrong time. What do you mean? You're making a presentation in front of a group of people, a board, whatever, company. Or you are being grilled, the new Spanish Inquisition by your boss, on things that are your core competency, should be.
Yep.
And then in comes the question, and you say to yourself, oh, I don't know the answer to that. And then when the imposter syndrome kicks in, well, I should. And if I don't act properly, I just outed myself and things will go badly. So what do you do when you sit there and you draw a blank or you don't know, but you know you should? What do you say? Well, here's a deadly answer. I don't know. And then you have people look at you, particularly your boss or the board of directors or clients say, well, wait a minute, isn't this your job? Isn't this what you're supposed to know? Oh, by the way, often happens that you don't know it's your job because management or whoever failed to communicate that you need to know that too. I've had that happen to me when I chastise someone and they say, well, I didn't know you wanted that. What do you mean you didn't know? I just never told me. Things that don't need to be said always need to be said. So what do you do then? How do you react? One of the ways I learned to react is say, I believe the answer to your question is X, but I need to know more about it as well. And rather than mislead you, allow me a couple of days. And if my representation is off or wrong or there's much more, I'll be back to you with more. I'll put in some concise points. I'm not saying I'm wrong. I'm not saying I should know. I'm not saying, oops. I'm saying, look, I'm actually smart and realistic about the situation. And I'm not going to purport to be something I'm not. Boss, I know the answer to this is this. And then a day later, you go back and say, oops, I was so wrong. That's much worse than appearing smart and understanding. I drew a blank. Maybe I should know it. If I forge ahead courageously, mindlessly, I'm an imposter. Now, guess what? That woman or that guy signs my check and can't fire me. Not the other way around.
Yeah.
Imposter. I never put that in that particular perspective until I began to learn from you.
Absolutely. And I absolutely resonate with a lot of what you said there, and especially around the fact that I come from I spent years working in the entertainment industry before I pivoted into tech and cybersecurity, and that was back in 2009. But because of the work that I've done in the cybersecurity industry, and I founded the UK Cybersecurity Association, which was the first dedicated trade body to cybersecurity in the UK, I would often get asked to, go on a podcast or be interviewed, for a publication or be a speaker at an event. And it always would really get me when I would be introduced as Lisa Ventura, cybersecurity expert. And I really would sort of cringe at that because there's so many different facets to cybersecurity. Many different myriads to it, different specialisms and so on. And I'm absolutely feel that I'm an imposter in cybersecurity. I don't come from a technical background and I don't profess to know everything there is to know about cybersecurity. I certainly wouldn't peg myself as being an expert in cybersecurity. I much prefer the term specialist, but I'm always very clear, even when using the term specialist, that what I actually specialize in when it comes to cybersecurity is the human elements of it. So social engineering, cybersecurity awareness training, cyber psychology, what drives hackers to do what they do. I would never profess to be that sort of technical person because I'm absolutely not. So those feelings of imposter syndrome really manifest themselves whenever I'm introduced as an expert in cybersecurity because I'm anything but an expert. I don't believe there's any one person that's an expert in everything to do with cybersecurity. It's absolutely impossible. There are new threats and new attacks and things coming out every second of every day. So again, for me, those feelings of imposter syndrome, really to manifest itself whenever I get asked to do something or asked to speak or, would I write for this publication or could I take part in this event? And when I felt the biggest imposter of all was getting a letter in the post from the UK government and the Cabinet Office saying I'd been awarded an MBE for services to cybersecurity and diversity, equity and inclusion that I was presented with from no less than King Charles himself. And oh, goodness, did I feel an imposter that day, stood up in front of him talking to him about cybersecurity and AI and so on as well. He was very knowledgeable
Hmm.
around those areas. But for me, it's for whatever I've done, trying to sort of quash those feelings of being an imposter. It's something I have to work really hard to
Well,
do. So I'd love to get
but
some
you do
insights or
understand.
tips. Yeah.
But you do understand that this is hierarchical. Now,
Mm.
you may not know everything because reality is in this world today, we can't, there isn't anyone who knows everything. There are
Yeah.
authorities, they're just hyper authorities and so on. I have a friend, former partner in your world, um, who does believe he knows everything. You read about him in the news all the time, and it's the only person in my life that gets away because we've known each other for decades. Who, when I promise you, I'm really taking advantage of that because I call him and I allow him to tell me that I'm a barely functioning idiot and then educate me.
Yeah.
That's a good balance for me. But he knows everything. He knows a lot. He and I were, I think, the ninth people on the backbone of the internet when this insanity started, but that's different. You know, it's interesting. A brief story, if you allow me. Uh, I was asked to address a group of 120 or so master's and PhD candidates at the Marshall School on international entrepreneurship. Perhaps I know something about it, but well, evidently I know more about it than they did and 12 professors. And uh, I thought about how much I know about this experiential. Yeah. No, I did hang out at some of the finest schools, talk to some really smart people, tried to get an education in my 30s, UCLA and SC and Stanford and Columbia, UPenn, Harvard Law, because I realized I needed to understand substance and structure more so than my impulse to act. But then I'm sitting in a room with 120 people, those 12 professors, which have those 12 had credentials without a doubt. And there's 120 people there. Half of them are just entitled and supercilious. The other half are no, not so much. They're eager to learn. Okay, so what am I going to say? So I don't come across as this guy thinks he knows everything. So I said, let me start. And this is supposed to be an hour. And I said, well, let me start this way. I said, can you people spell entrepreneur? Silly. You. And I said, no. So I went to the big whiteboard because I always have a big whiteboard. And I wrote on there Rolaids. I don't know if they sell Rolaids in the UK. Rolaids is the number one perennial selling antacid in America. Been around for a decade, 100 years. I said, you know what? This is an antacid. This is what an entrepreneur relies on to begin with. You know, your stomach, because you wake up early in the morning and you know you have to create your own action, period, or you don't eat Rolaids. And I said, you know what the big fundamental difference you guys and me? You guys had a nice lunch an hour ago. You can listen to me talk for an hour. Then you go on about your day. I just got off a 17-hour flight and I am on time because the freeway was not clogged. And if you look at me, I washed up in the executive room here, and I always carry an extra shirt in my bag because who the hell knows where my bag is? Now, I then said, okay, let's go straight to questions and answers. Huh? And the woman that recruited me for this, a professor there, she went like this. So I said to myself, in as much as every speech I give, Q&A always runs longer than the speech. And as long as I'm looking at the people who just say, who's this guy who thinks he knows this stuff? I said, any questions? Let's just skip the Q&A. So an hour later, I handed out the one pager, which had 18 talking points on it, absolutely irrelevant, red and white underwear, front-loading washing machines, avocado regain pots and pans, Croatian hijackers. What the heck is all of that? Well, nobody wants me to deliver boxes and arrows. but you'll remember the story of the French guy, and you'll remember that story. Again, I think I'm standing there and saying smart people, inquisitive people, disbelieving people, they're going to say, the guy's just another talking head. I said, well, perhaps, but maybe I'm not entirely talking head. And without a doubt, they all look, those adults, look very critically to everybody's talking to them. The last thing you want is them to out you as always making it up. Or, hey, how many times have I, and Lisa, an hour and some minutes later, I said, okay, you guys want to hear the speech? Yeah. Okay, so that 1 hour thing ran two and change. And my last question was, how many of you had another class that you blew? Half of them were an hour late to the next gig. I felt very good about presenting myself for everything I was and everything I was not. And many times I actually said to these fine people, anybody here have a good answer to the question that young woman just asked? Of course, that creates a lot of engagement. And some people show themselves to be really introspective, and some people show themselves to be absolutely limited. I want to say stupid, but I'm being kind. And I hope that addresses this to some extent, because I promise you, it's on my mind. When I speak or I'm asked a question, whatever, I need to consider that I don't come across arrogant, and I don't come across as the guy, nobody wants to hear that imposter. He's got to be a fraud. And some of the things I have done and talked about people doing this seriously. Are you kidding? You actually sold horse manure? Yeah, I was a horse manure king of South America for a while. And that's a lesson in recognizing opportunity, exploiting opportunity, but it's a story for another day. Again, I have become more acutely aware of being genuine. And I think it's really disarming when you are genuine rather than condescending.
Yeah.
There's a difference between the two. I can condescend. People as smart as you can condescend to anyone, and it takes them a day to say, wait a minute, I was being condescended to, because you were elegant about the way you do that. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And gosh, yeah, a lot of that, and especially I can relate as well to the starting from humble beginnings. And I never forget as well, where I came from and the fact that I started out my career actually working the checkouts in my local supermarket because I was doing all my studies. I had that job while I was studying and so on, because that's how I was brought up was you go out, you do your studying and you go out to work. And I went out and I did exactly that. And then I got the opportunity, looking back, it was the opportunity of a lifetime when I went to work at a management company for TV and radio personalities. And I actually ended up working with the host of the UK Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the first host of it, Chris Tarrant. And I worked with him for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really involved in that whole kind of entertainment showbiz world and so on. And I got to see Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which had the working title of Cash Mountain, go from a format on A4 paper to the global, and I do mean global phenomenon. I mean, oh my goodness, I could never have predicted it.
Still is.
Yeah, absolutely. And over here we have a new host. We have Jeremy Clarkson hosting it, so it's still going strong, even today. But back then in the mid 90s when it came out, oh my goodness, it went stratospheric. And boy, did I feel an imposter. I felt such an imposter even then of what am I doing here? How, am I working with Chris? There's so many more worthy people that, can be working with him and doing what I'm doing. And yet, here I am in this position working on the most well-known quiz show that there was at the time and is still going strong today. And yeah, the levels of imposter syndrome that, despite all of that and that success that I had in that role, the success I had working with Chris, the success of where Millionaire went all over the world. But I still had that inner imposter of I shouldn't be here. Other people are far better at this than I am, and I'm a complete fraud, and I'm going to be found out at any second.
Oh, oh,
Feelings that have
Lisa,
never
Lisa,
gone.
couple of things. I assert to
Mm,
certainty
mm,
that I can learn from anyone.
mm.
And I am a shameless researcher,
Yeah.
absolutely without shame. But then I will talk to the young kid who parked my car because he comes from a little town in Guatemala. And I have been in Guatemala in some years, and he enlightens me how things are. I also learn, well, listen, I called the Pope, the Holy Father, one early morning to ask a theological question. Pretty shameless, doable. Yes, it is. I'm testimony to that. And then in terms of learning, now, I am very quick to look at people who I think they have a lot to offer. Everybody does something, who have a great deal to offer that I take interest in it. Now, I take interest in it because it's happenstance. Ooh, I sat next to that man on an airplane, and he is a worldwide authority on reproductive systems rights, etc., in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, I don't exactly spend a lot of nights aware thinking about it, but my God, what an opportunity. So when that comes up, if it does, I can speak with some authority without feeling like a fraud. I think, no, I heard, I know. And I have done that. I have been lost on airplanes. I ended up in the wrong continent once because I sat next to the most interesting man. It was phenomenal. What I learned was phenomenal, of no use. So many hours later, when I called my wife, and she said, honey, aren't you supposed to be in Budapest? I said, nah, I'm actually in Istanbul. Why? Sat next to a really cool guy on a plane from New York to Paris. And instead of making that connection, I bought another ticket and sat next to him for another 3.5 hours. What a lesson. When do I get an opportunity to meet someone like that? Now I can talk about that and not feel, look, the terrible line in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. In a room full of really smart people, I can talk about reproductive system rights, etc., in much of sub-Saharan Africa, and people nod, interesting. But I feel like a fraud because I kind of make it. No, I'm not making it up. I learned that. The one thing I never felt an imposter about. Uh, how quickly I adopted this whole paradigm of imposter syndrome is I too have very humble beginnings in this country. We were penniless immigrants in LA in my teens. My father was actually a world-class scientist, but not here. I couldn't ask my dad for money. I couldn't ask my magnificent, elegant mother for money. So I hustled people on tennis courts for food. When I was 16, 17, I was national ranked, but still, you put on the old t-shirt and you stand there, Mister, will you play with me? And then you hustle. And then the thing I don't feel any qualms about being an imposter is I do something called pillars of success. Now, you know, and humble beginnings, one of those pillars has to do with you say yes when other people say no. Now, the reason I don't feel an imposter about it is, well, there's a lot of things I've said yes to in my business life that perhaps I should not have had I been smarter, wiser. But the one thing, uh, the by far the most important job I have ever had, came a time, I think I was 17, where I just couldn't make enough money hustling people on tennis courts. I was going to college at 18. So I got a job at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in LA, a massive healthcare outfit. One of the more carnivorous businesses turns out to be today. Oh, they also do healthcare, but they just buy businesses. What they really do, it's an argument they and I are having. Uh, I got a job cleaning rat cages in the laboratories. Now, you go into the big, beautiful building, everything's shiny, antiseptic. You go down 4 floors, still shiny, antiseptic. Then you go through the double doors and you find out why God made trash cans. Because you can't eat or drink for 8 hours. That's awful. But I preach about having had that as the best job I've ever had.
Yeah.
It paid 24 cents an hour more than anything else I could get. Two, I really learned to understand the value of honest work, honest money. And I walked away from that with a work ethic that was even beyond what my amazing parents had. They beat that into me from the time I was born. So I am really the one thing I do in the weekly podcasts and the expert talks and jawing is I hold forth the pillars of success. I feel on total footing, solid footing, not making it up, don't feel bad lecturing about my pillars of success. And one of those goes back to humble beginnings and what I hold that's the best job I've ever had. The life lesson I learned also, the structure and the grounding, feet firmly planted and understanding who you are, what you're going to do. Very important. Of course, next is the next two things I related, particularly my interaction, my friend and mentor John, who explained to me what the difference between what I was, who I was, and what I represented, and what I am, who I am, what I represent. There is a significant chasm there, and one of those is genuine, and one of those skirts imposter.
Absolutely. And honestly, Stephen, I could talk to you. I've said this to a few of our guests, but I genuinely could talk to you for hours. But we are running out of time for this particular session. So, do you have any closing things that you would like to leave with our audience, particularly around imposter syndrome, before we wrap up today?
Well, yeah, I think that one of my pillars of success
Hmm.
has to do with taking inventory.
Yeah.
In other words, and the way I describe that in the simplest of terms, you know, when you're in bed 2, 3 in the morning, can't sleep, your eyes are wide open, can't sleep. The things that keep you from sleeping. It's quiet. There's nothing else going on. That's when you are most honest with yourself. That is when you take inventory. Who you are, what are you doing, what you're not doing, what you should be doing, what you really represent, what are your interactions with people. That's about the only time most people are truly honest with themselves. No, people are not honest with anyone, including themselves, when they're laying on a psychiatrist's couch. You are in the middle of the night when that's all there is. And then you work to it in your mind and hopefully go back to sleep. Take inventory who you are, what you are. Then you maximize your strength. You learn. You want to hear me talk for 2 more hours? I'll be glad to talk about homework. How much homework you're going to do? Not enough. And when you're done, you do more. And when you're done, you do even more. That, by the way, is if there is a symptom of me, and I'll go back for just one more minute, in terms of one of the symptoms of imposter syndrome is when we are done doing all that homework and we go ahead, forge ahead with that project or whatever the heck it is, the unhappiest guy in the room is me.
Yep.
Because I know I could have done more, done better. Oh my God, I have to write this for some magazine. Oh, I knocked that stuff out. I mean, I can write 10,000 words on mating habits of wallabies. And it sometimes good, sometimes very good, sometimes okay. Oh, that's fantastic. Editor will say, a publisher will say, I'm sitting there saying, oh God, I'm almost embarrassed. I know I could have done better. And I say, I can do better. Why do you say that? I think I recognize that from the symptoms you sent me. You know, back to what I leave you with is take inventory and understand who you are, what you can, what you can't do. Go maximize that, study that, learn how to elegantly walk away from that. And a life lesson. And this is something I do I have for years, and I absolutely steadfastly preach. You can never learn enough about anything or yourself. Knowledge is ubiquitous today. There is 19 lifetimes is not enough for me to comment on what you do. Although, good God, I mean, in Microsoft and Elon Musk and Grok and all that. Oh, are you kidding? The big, massive library in the sky is right there by fingertips. And then they even tell me why I think the way I think. But there is just every day, and I do this religiously, I promise. Time remains the only truly perishable thing in life. We can't get this back today. My interview with you has a dimension that I'll never experience that. Hey, life is not a dress rehearsal. We may never do this again. It's my opportunity to learn. Listening to you and you allowing me to talk is a learning experience for me. But in the course of my day, this is 7 days a week for decades. If at the end of my day, my head hits the pillow, I cannot identify two things I have learned that day. Now, mind you, they could be, wow, brand new to me. But there's a billion other people already know this.
Yeah.
But again, if you're in search of some independent thought, kind of cool. If I can't identify two things I just learned today, or, oh, the light bulb went on. I didn't know it. I didn't actually think about that before. If I can't do that and absolutely do it, cognitive do it, I wasted the most important commodity on earth, which is time. That's something I thankfully I've had the opportunity to say to some really cool people, smart people, young people, older people who, and then we have this thing going. Hey, what'd you learn today? Go away, said a friend of mine who just published his 12th bestseller. Okay, he's a world-renowned academic. I don't know. He only talks to me, I promise, because we've known each other since we were kids. Otherwise, he won't talk to me. I'm ordinary. But I'll say, okay, well, did you read the article in Le Monde I just wrote? No, I haven't. But what have you learned today? And the obscurity of what he learns is irrelevant. But okay, are you going to give me a quiz? Says a college professor as an endowed chair at a major university. The answer is no. It helps me remain focused on something that's very important. I hope that doing that makes me less appear to be an imposter when I share stuff, when I talk. It all inures to something called being a substantial individual. You, and I'm not being nice to you, trust me in this. A lot of things patronizing is not one of them. You are a substantial individual. It's not a bank account. It's not material stuff. It's what you as a person bring to the picnic. You as a genuine talent bring to the, as a genuine pro bring to the picnic. And if you are an imposter, Lisa, well, if we were to spend, 700, 800 hours together, I might challenge you on some stuff that you have competencies in. Beyond that, you're as non-imposter as they come.
Thank you, Stephen. And thank you so much for joining me today for this discussion. And if I want to just wrap up with one of the takeaways, it's that time is, it is our most precious commodity. I'd say time and health, because if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And time is absolutely so precious. So I will close with that takeaway from this today. Stephen, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to
My
have
pleasure
you.
entirely.
And we do have a couple of other things coming up, some more Q&A discussions. And don't forget, everyone, to keep talking about imposter syndrome on our Facebook page, on LinkedIn, and also on X, or Twitter, as I still call it today. We want to continue the conversation, not just today, but throughout the year as well. So do join us over on our social media channels. And we'll be back with our next guest very shortly.